All right, so this is going to be a part two to the conversation I had with Lissa yesterday concerning the failed Friday forecast, the triple iteration there. So I know that Lissa and I talked about some of the impacts and implications of what happens in general when a forecast of a certain magnitude busts. And I just wanted to go back and tidy up some places that I may have missed. First of all, I wouldn't call it a podcast, but early in our conversation, I mentioned or alluded to the color issue with these risk zones, and moderate risk, which again is level 4 out of 5, corresponds to the color red. And I'm all about where professional meteorology intersects the amateur layman psychology, if you will. So let's just dive into the specific example that was Friday. So the day before, I didn't mention this, but Thursday there was already signs that this would be a notable day. We were in an enhanced risk on a day 2 convective outlook, and that will raise eyebrows if you follow the weather news closely. And then it was the morning of the threat that the enhanced risk got upgraded to a moderate for, again, that northwestern quadrant. I don't know about you, but I think when we see the color red, that should indicate a certain magnitude of warning and, as such, a certain level of action. And I believe a lot of people were taking the appropriate action only for nothing to happen. And I have seen moderate risks verify poorly, even though there were like isolated cells that verified. In this case, there was nothing. This was one of the worst botched moderate risks I've ever seen, and the tornado watch that was associated to it, and I'll have to do some research, but there's evidence based on the fact that hardly anything happened in that tornado watch that was issued for Middle Tennessee. This might have been one of the worst watches, whether severe thunderstorm watch or tornado watch, that was issued by the SBC all year. Now, SBC in Norman, Oklahoma issues these watches, these risks, and the National Weather Service acts as a sort of messenger. They will, in their area forecast discussions, kind of give hints as to what they're really feeling, and sometimes even through those social media, which was not the case 5-10 years ago, you kind of get an idea of what they're thinking behind the scenes through those avenues. And it seemed like the National Weather Service was in agreement with what the Storm Prediction Center was issuing, what they were communicating. So it seemed like there was a definite agreement there, which boosted the confidence. At least the first half of the day, it boosted my confidence that something was going to happen. Again, we see the color red and we think code red, like, okay, this is happening. Like, I think the color red in our minds, maybe not everyone's mind, but it just definitely links up to something of great magnitude is either likely to happen or will happen. Again, I'm not saying that's how the weather defines it in terms of probabilities. The weather community defines it, that is. I'm talking about the psychology of it. Those severe weather criteria probabilities, I am very persistent in showing those and communicating those. And like I said yesterday, just because we have the built-in probabilities with these risk zones doesn't mean we could hide behind the math when things don't verify. So far, I haven't seen any ownership of the bust. I think that probably those who are tied to the issues would say, well, if storms were to fire up, then they would have exploded. Kind of, not saying it would have been April 27, 2011 as Alabama saw it, but if break through all the caps and there was enough lift at the surface in the lower levels of the atmosphere, storms would have exploded up because the conditions were ripe in the mid and upper levels. So you could see the graphics that the National Weather Service posted yesterday. I included those in our in the 20-minute conversation vid that I posted yesterday. The problem is that American modeling, it just missed a lot of things, and I'm not sure if we could say, well, the models didn't catch it. That's true, but I don't think we could hide behind it either. Something tells me that there should have been something that indicated that, based on where the parent low was tracking, where the stable, drier air intrusion, like where that would rotate around the low. Like there was going to be a part, there was going to be some territory, there was going to be a region in the outlooked areas that were going to be infiltrated with this stable drier air, and no models caught on to it. And by the time by the time short-term res modeling was catching on to the fact nothing was happening, by that point it was too late. SPC held on to their risk zone instead of downgrading, which I disagree with. In short, the American modeling verified very, very poorly with Friday's storms. And it's not so much it's hard to believe, it's just hard to accept that there wasn't any model, at least to my knowledge, that could have, again, caught that area that was going to be affected by the stable, drier air invading the mid-levels, as far as the based on where the parent low was tracking up in the Great Lakes region. It clicked me, and I posted this on American WX, one of the forums I follow. This was the winter storm equivalent of dry slotting, which, there's been times where I would say, hey, we're going to get some snow, but it doesn't exactly fall. It's falling overhead, but it's just evaporating when it reaches this. By the time it reaches the surface, the dry air is eating it up, as we like to say in the weather community. And essentially, this is what happened here. There was some type of cap that was preventing air rising at all levels, and sometimes that drier air can be good for thunderstorm development depending on what level of the atmosphere it comes into. But in this case, it was creating sinking air, which is the exact opposite of what you want for storms to fire. There was literally a invisible cap that models weren't detecting, and to me, that's where the science needs to improve moving forward. As far as what I would have done and learning from this incident, again, there's so many threats that happen on a year-to-year basis. You can't just put all your eggs in one basket. But I think that the enhanced risk should have carried over from Thursday into Friday morning, and there should not have been a moderate risk issued for the Middle Tennessee viewing area. Maybe Kentucky, if they thought fit up there. Again, I think that when you look at where the storms exploded and verified, central and eastern Kentucky was kind of ground zero and upper portions of the Cumberland Plateau. But it's hard to accept the fact that there wasn't any hesitancy that storms would have trouble firing up. And if there was, then there's no way that a moderate risk should have been issued. Keep it at enhanced. And if storms start to fire up, in the nowcasting where it's like, okay, we're seeing storms on radar, then you could upgrade to a moderate risk. And the beauty of the time and era we live in is nowcasting has never had a better footing because we all live in the now through technology. It's easier than ever to get updates on our phone. A lot of us live, breathe, and die by our phones or technology, whether we accept it or not. So I feel like there would be no harm in saying, hey, we have an enhanced a level 3 out of 5, and then you upgrade it once the evidence is increased, or like you can actually pinpoint and see storms that are trackable. Now, that's just my opinion. I think what I'm trying to do is find a way to safeguard the higher risk zones, the level 4 moderate and the level 5 high. You don't want those to bust, because when that happens, it betrays confidence a little bit. It dilutes the trust that the everyday people have with the local weather authorities, and you don't want that. Unfortunately, this is going to happen time and time again until we get this right. Again, my problem was, I guess, just accepting the moderate before really digging in and seeing what was behind it. Again, I think you have to be faithful in communicating risk and based on the parameters. Yes, I mean, they were highly unusual for July. And if there was enough lift to get the storms generated, then yeah, it was going to be. It could have been really bad. But you need both sides of the equation. You need a lifting mechanism to line up with the ingredients, the vertical shear column, and just the juicy parameters. I mean, we had you could step outside and you could taste that humidity practically. You could taste the moisture in the air. So yeah, sorry for the rambling here. I just think that we got to be careful, especially careful with our moderate and our high risks. High risk is like you get a purple color. That's like red on steroids, essentially. But with moderate, it corresponds to the color red, and the way we think of red or perceive red. I just think that between the National Weather Service and SPC, that relationship, they got to somehow find a way to be more careful when they're issuing those higher level threats, especially if there's any hesitancy that these storms might not even get off the ground, which is what happened in our area. Now, again, 150 miles to our east and northeast, those risks would have verified. No one's complaining over on the plateau. No one's complaining in Bowling Green, Louisville. You could draw that line on I-65 in points east. I guess all I'm saying is the hesitancy must be factored into the overall equation with the parameters that suggest something significant could happen. We can't take American models face value. We can't take their biases at face value. We got to factor them in somehow. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who would say, well, there's just certain things you're not going to know until the event's underway, and I get that. But in my opinion, if I want to find a proactive way of alerting people of an impending threat, but not setting it up for overkill, or I know let's kind of debunk the whole crying wolf thing, so I don't want to say crying wolf. If we want to build in a safety net, some built-in security, while faithfully communicating a threat, I think enhanced risk under the conditions we were under on Friday would have been the best way to go to stay there. And if you need to upgrade to a moderate, fine. And then if you need to downgrade it, you can go to a slight risk down from an enhanced. And then at that point, you're just keeping, between what's actually happening and the risk zone, you're plus or minusing one instead of being multiple risk zones off. I'm not sure what you think. If you've listened this far, thank you. I know a lot of this probably was rambling to you, but I want my voice to be a part of improving the process somehow, some way, and my voice is bettered by receiving your input and your opinion and your thoughts. So if you have any to share, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If not, I'll sign off. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful Sunday. Godspeed.